Hello Internet! Recently, after a very long time, I took out my old Roland JV-80 synthesizer from the cabinet. It's a device from the early 1990s, so it's at least 28 years old. And when I unwrapped and looked at the device, at the instrument, I made a horrible discovery. I encountered the red glue from home. There was a very sticky red substance gluing some of the keys together. It was dripping down from the bottom of the keys. And I found out where this problem comes from and mostly how to deal with it. Hello, I'm Future Edwin, and I'm happy to tell you that I could solve the problem 100%. And this Roland JV-80 is now completely free from the red glue. In this video I will show you how to do it. You will see it's quite a labor-intensive process, so maybe if you want to avoid it for some time, here are some things to consider. The glue was used to mount the weight plates that are on the bottom side of the keys. And the problem with the glue is that due to aging and due to temperature, it loses its viscosity and starts to drip down. I think it should be possible to live with this red glue problem at least for some time if you don't use the instrument in very hot temperature. What you definitely shouldn't do is to store the keyboard with the keys upside, so you shouldn't store it in such a position. The glue will drip down and run into the instrument and mess up the electronics or the keyboard switches. So I would recommend to store the instrument either horizontally, flat like this, or maybe even better to store it with the keys pointing downward, because then if the glue starts to drip, it will drip to the front of the keys outside of the instrument. So the only important thing is that you don't put anything precious underneath the instrument that could be messed up. If you have one of these old devices at home, maybe you want to check on it and take this into consideration. Good luck! Those are nice thoughts, past self, but luck is not good enough for us here. So let's start and solve this problem once and for all. First, we need to remove the bottom plate so we can get at the keyboard assembly. We need to remove 26 screws on the back of the device. You do not need to remove the 4 rubber feet, and you can also leave alone the cover of the expansion port slot.
The keyboard is mounted to the chassis using 5 C-type and 2 F-type screws. Unfortunately, one of the C-type screws is blocked by the mainboard assembly. In order to get access to the screws holding the mainboard, we first need to lift up the card reader board. I first take out the 2 screws at the back of the board, and then I unscrew the 2 screws on the connector panel next to the card reader slot. Now I can lift the card reader board out of the way in order to access the mainboard screw. There are 2 further screws holding the mainboard. They have some kind of grounded springs attached to them. Finally, there are 4 screws for the mainboard on the connector panel, 2 next to the PCM card slot and 2 next to the MIDI port. After taking these out, the mainboard becomes loose and I'm able to move it a few centimeters out of the way, just enough to get access to the mounting screw of the keyboard. Here it is. Oops, almost lost it. The rest is straightforward. We have 1 F-type screw at either side mounting the keyboard assembly to the plastic elements, and 4 remaining C-type screws at the top of the keyboard assembly. Here's the remaining F-type screw going into the plastic, and now the keyboard should be free to move. But before we take it out, we need to remove the ribbon cables. In order to do this, you grab the reinforced part of the cable with both hands and pull it backwards gently, maybe wiggling it a bit left to right but not up and down. Finally, I can lift out the keyboard assembly. And here it is. What a beauty. Well, maybe not quite yet. When you handle a keyboard, take care not to damage the aftertouch sensor strip that goes over the metal at one end of the keyboard. Next to the key hinges, there is a plastic stopper strip that keeps the keys from slipping out. In order to remove a key, you can slightly lift the stopper strip, and then after taking out the key spring, the key can be removed. In order to remove a black key, you first need to take out both adjacent white keys. According to my research, the red glue is pretty much immune to any kind of solvent that you would usually use to remove glue residue. However, it can be attacked with alkaline substances like drain cleaner. First, I applied the drain cleaner to the inside of 2 keys in order to test whether it's safe to use it on a plastic. Time to completely disassemble a keyboard. I started by removing all the keyboard springs, which works best with bare hands and a lot of patience. Then I pulled off the stopper strip. It is mounted using some double-sided adhesive tape, which needs to be replaced every time you remove the stopper. Now I could push the keys a little forward and they should come out easily. Well, except for those that are stuck by the red glue. Yuck. Time to inspect the test keys. After about 45 minutes, I saw no degradation of the plastic at all, so the drain cleaner seems to be totally safe to apply to the plastic. First, I scrubbed all of the keys using some normal dishwashing liquid. That didn't do anything. Save yourself the trouble and go straight to the drain cleaner. Be sure to protect your hands and, even more importantly, your eyes from the drain cleaner. At first I was a bit shy when mixing the cleaning solution. Don't be. It seems the higher the concentration of the drain cleaner, the better it works. Let's check the pH of our solution. That's a lot of pH. When I scrubbed the keys with the drain cleaner, the metal cleaned up nicely. However, the weight blades did not yet come loose. I put all the keys in a hot drain cleaner solution in order to let them soak for some time. The water should be hot enough to get good cleaning action, but not so hot as to warp the plastic. I used about 50 degrees Celsius, which seemed to work fine. Several times I added hot water and new cleaner to keep things going. While the keys were soaking, I went to clean up the rest of the keyboard assembly. First, I scraped off the drops of red glue using a plastic card. This worked quite well as the glue is rather soft and it sticks to itself even more than to anything else. Protecting the keyboard switches with a piece of cardboard, I used a vacuum cleaner to get rid of most of the dust. Some compressed air took care of the rest in places close to the keyboard switches. Then I removed the old grease from the key dampers and hinges. Meanwhile, the keys were soaking in the drain cleaner. And finally a promising sign. The weight plates started to move inside the keys. I ground myself a tool from an old screwdriver. It is shaped like a small hook and it worked very well for pulling out the weight plates. What a satisfying sound. Almost like cracking oysters. While the drain cleaner does not hurt the plastic at all, it can be quite corrosive to metals. So do not leave the weight plates in the cleaner any longer than necessary. A perceived eternity of scrubbing later, all the keys were clean. It's funny, when you play those things, they never seem to have enough keys. 36 white keys done, 25 black keys to go. The keyboard assembly already looked much better, but there was one task remaining: to remove the glue residue from the stopper strip, and this turned out to be a veritable nightmare. I soaked some paper strips in WD-40 and put them on the glue residue in order to dissolve it. In the end it worked, but it took a lot of time and scraping. This acrylic adhesive they used seems to bond really well to metal. I think I needed an hour to remove all the glue. When the keys were clean and dried, I used 2-component epoxy to glue in the weight plates again. I re-greased the dampers and keyboard hinges using silicone grease. Silicone grease has the advantage that it does not degrade rubbers and plastics. Reassembling the keys was quite straightforward. I just needed to push the keys carefully into the hinges and fasten them using the key springs. The black keys are all the same, but the white keys come in a variety of shapes. Luckily, the plastic castings of the keys have labels, and I took pictures before disassembling the keyboard so I could remount them in exactly the same order. Actually, the black keys also come with some different labels, and I also replaced them in exactly the same order, just in case. I don't think it makes any difference. A pair of needle nose pliers helped a lot in putting the springs back in place. There was a minor problem with the black keys. The epoxy had built up some burrs which were rubbing against the key dampers. I just used a knife to remove the burrs and it worked fine. While the keyboard was coming back together nicely, one formidable question remained: how to reapply the stopper strip? Following the service manual, I could have ordered some new adhesive tape from Japan. But honestly, I'd had enough of glue for half a lifetime. So I decided a modification was in order to improve the maintainability of the keyboard for the future. I would drill through the stopper strip and the metal and use some self-tapping screws in order to mount the stopper. Okay, That wasn't going to end well. Time to get real. While appeasing the gods of metalworking didn't prevent the breaking of my precious carbide drill, they at least sent me the wisdom to buy a sharp drill bit, use lower RPM, and at least make a bad excuse of an attempt at work holding. What a difference a sharp drill and at least an approximation to rigidity makes. Now that the keyboard was assembled, I wanted to test it before I put it back into the instrument. The keyboard is a simple matrix of diodes and switches, so I first measured one of the diodes and it showed about 540 millivolts of forward voltage. Each key closes two of the switches in the matrix, and if the contacts are working, a multimeter in diode measuring mode should display a voltage close to the forward voltage of the diode when the key is pressed. I had refurbished the keyboard switches earlier and all of them measured fine at around 600 millivolts. There had been some non-functional switches before. The multimeter had shown them either as open or with a high forward voltage around 1 volt, indicating a bad contact. Putting the multimeter in resistance mode in the, let's say, 20 kilo ohms range, you can also test the aftertouch sensor strip. You see that when I press down the key firmly, the resistance of the aftertouch sensor reduces. After all that work, let's take a few seconds to admire the before and after difference. No more red glue in this instrument. Finally, I put the keyboard assembly back in the instrument, taking care not to quench any of the cables between keyboard assembly and chassis. Now comes the big moment of activating the built-in test program. To do this, you hold down the keys number 1, number 8 and right while you turn on the power. The test mode shows up, and as described in the service manual, you have several sub-modes for testing all the analog to digital conversion of the assignable sliders and so on. Test mode 7 is for the keyboard, and it immediately showed that no key press is registered. No wonder, I hadn't yet reconnected the ribbon cables. So let's do that. I wiped the contacts with some deoxidizing tuner spray and put the cables back in place. And sure enough, every key registered perfectly now. In hindsight, I'm not completely pleased with the work I did on the stopper, even though I still think it was the right decision to go for the screws, and the Roland engineers should have done so in the first place. The result is quite okay, but it would have been better if I had had more metalworking skills and equipment. The screwed down stopper does not hold the keys quite as firmly as the glued one. I think it could be made equally strong by using about twice as many screws as I did. But in the end I figured, if people are pulling forcefully on the keys, they deserve whatever they get. Be very careful if you attempt to modify the stopper yourself, as it is made from some very brittle plastic and it easily breaks when you're working on it. In particular, do not try any punching or stamping on the stopper strip. It's much better to grind or to drill it.
And here it is, in all its newfound glueless beauty. I hope you found this video interesting or useful. If so, please leave a like. And if you have your own experiences with the red glue, or maybe even you know a better method to get rid of it, please share below and comment. Thanks for watching. Bye.